Welcome to All Grown Up Now, Tales of a Checkered Past. I'm Kenneth D. King, podcasting from my studio near Union Square in New York City. This podcast is an evolution of the tale, All Grown Up Now, A Friendship in 3 Acts. This is Season 2, and it's called Tales of a Checkered Past. It's a collection of short stories from my salad days on up to the present. In each podcast, another self-contained story will be presented. These podcasts will be broadcast bi-weekly, so you get 2 a month. Enjoy. Episode 44 is called The Stolen Wallet. The time is the mid-70s. The place is Oklahoma City. It's another one of the tales from my checkered past that didn't get into the novel All Grown Up Now. In the early 90s, Kathy got an unusual package in the mail one day. It was sent by a construction worker who was working on a demolition site down on 10th and May. It seems that he found some very weathered remains of a wallet on the roof of the old dive bar that was being torn down. In the note that accompanied the package, he said that he thought that even though the driver's license was decades out of date, that he would mail it to the address on the off chance that the owner still lived there. Since Kathy inherited the house after Miss Ann died, she got the package. In it were the remains of a wallet that was stolen out of Miss Ann's handbag in the mid-70s. Sadly, most of it was weathered beyond recognition, just tattered bits of paper and leather. The driver's license and credit cards survived only because they were laminated. This is the story. In the mid-70s, I worked for an ice cream store called Brahms Ice Cream on 23rd and Meridian. Sadly, my hated older sister Lori worked at the same place. The Pied Piper was a strip joint right next to the ice cream store. The Pied Piper was where the clapped-out old strippers, those near the end of their careers, would jiggle their tits for the patrons. Now, this was such a low-rent joint that the strippers had to feed the jukebox for music to dance to. Lori loved to hang around the Pied Piper, good slutty Christian girl that she was, and she visited almost every time she went to work. When Lori was next door, I would end up stuck in the parking lot, sitting in the car, waiting until she was good and ready to leave. One time, she enticed me into the bar on some stupid pretext, which I resisted vigorously for quite some time. When I finally gave in and went inside, I was met by the sight of one of the strippers wagging her saggy tits on stage, a sight that made me want to bolt for the door. I immediately turned my back, turned bright red of embarrassment, and started walking out. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around just in time to hear this girl say, "Hey, honey, don't you like the show?" With this, she rubbed her saggy tits against my chest and groped me as everyone looked on and laughed. Repulsed, I ran outside and almost threw up my dinner in the parking lot. Riding home in the car later, Lori laughed about it. She thought the whole thing was real funny. "Can't you take a joke?" she snarled. It was just a joke is the refuge of the bully who gets called on shitty behavior. I hated being stuck in the car in the parking lot, especially on school nights. The strange thing was that if I had gone home and left Lori there to find her own way home, I would have gotten in trouble from Miss Ann for leaving her there. Never mind, she shouldn't have been there in the first place because she was underage. In the weird calculus that was the relationship between Mom and Lori, this was totally right and proper. Strange, but I digress. The type of man that Lori took up with was one of the lower orders, which made the Pied Piper the ideal venue, as they didn't cater to a posh crowd. I guess you could say Laurie had a taste for rough trade. There was one guy in particular, we'll call him Jim. That's not his real name, but Laurie didn't know his real name either, especially his last name to be sure. Jim drove a beat-up, douched-out, oxidized purple Super Bee muscle car with rusted mag wheels and an 8-track player that always seemed to be playing Lynyrd Skynyrd or REO Speedwagon. He had long, oily black hair and scraggly facial hair. A beard would be too dignified a name for his mangy growth, and he didn't bathe regularly. It was love at first sight for Laurie. One evening soon after they met, Laurie went out on a date with Jim. Afterwards, they arrived home after curfew. Laurie always arrived home late. It was a fuck you to Miss Ann. Laurie invited Jim in. I was in bed but awake and heard them in the dining room. Laurie went into the bathroom, leaving Jim alone in our house. When Laurie got out of the bathroom, Jim had to leave right away. The next morning, Miss Ann's wallet went missing from her handbag, which was sitting on the dining room table. Miss Ann asked me if I'd seen it, and I told her about Laurie leaving this stranger alone in the house while she went to the bathroom, so Miss Ann got Laurie out of bed. "What's his name?" Miss Ann demanded. "He stole my wallet out of my purse." "He would never do such a thing," Laurie shouted back a bit too dramatically, in that Romeo and Juliet against the world tone she could do to perfection. Oh, did I mention that she didn't know Jim's last name? "You probably didn't put it back in your purse." Well, you should have heard the screeching that ensued after that remark. Miss Ann wasn't one to misplace her wallet. She was so tight with the dollar that she never let the wallet out of her sight unless she was sleeping, and that was just because her eyes were closed. She couldn't help it. As it was, I remember her getting the wallet out earlier that evening to give my other sister Kathy money for a Jethro Tull concert, and I saw her put the wallet back in her bag. The police were called, the credit cards were canceled, and all that stuff was taken care of. But the loss that devastated Miss Ann most was one certain photo. This photo was a Polaroid taken the night Mom and Dad met. They were on a double date. She and her friend Ruth went on a double date with Dad and his friend Bob Wilkie. Miss Ann and Ruth looked like twins and both worked at different banks. That's how they met, as people would call Miss Ann Ruth and would call Ruth Annie. Ruth was born in Germany and Miss Ann was born in Salina, but they did look like twins. Miss Ann was dating Bob and Dad was dating Ruth, but before the evening was over, they had changed dates. Very adult of them. This photo was of the four of them in the corner booth of the Plantation Restaurant in Salina, Kansas in 1954. I remember it from childhood. The four of them sitting in the round corner booth of button-tufted vinyl with knotty pine paneling in the background. Miss Ann and Ruth were sitting between Dad and Bob, smiling. Since it was a Polaroid, this was the only copy she had of the night she met her now-dead husband, the love of her life. That was the most searing loss. Everything else could be replaced. Needless to say, there was hell to pay for that wallet being stolen. Laurie was the staunch defender of this lowlife. "He would never do such a thing," she would shout. "He says he'll go to talk to the police just to prove to you he didn't do it." Which he never did. Miss Ann would keep asking what his last name was so she could report him to the police. Laurie could never get a name from him, or so she would say. She probably never asked. So I finally took matters in hand by going up to the Pied Piper and taking his license plate number down. Not a pretty picture. The car was registered to someone else, and the someone else was female and quite a bit older. About 3 weeks later, Miss Ann got a call from one of the credit card companies. They told her that they had received a call from a bar on 10th and May saying that they had found her wallet. One of the help found it in the parking lot. Miss Ann was overjoyed and called the place. "Be here at exactly 8 o'clock tomorrow night to pick up your wallet. It will be at the bar," the guy said. "Don't come before, and don't be late." Miss Ann told all this to Harry, her lawyer, in passing later that day when she was signing some papers. "What the hell are you thinking, woman? Don't you dare go in there alone," he shouted. "That's one of the worst biker bars in this town. People have been known to disappear from there. If you go, you take someone with you and call the police and let them know you're going and tell them why." So that evening, Miss Ann called her friends Sue and the police, got dressed up, and went to the dive bar. They got there a bit early, and they weren't prepared for what awaited them. Now, imagine this. A ladies' who lunch gal wearing a French twist a la Kim Novak in Vertigo, with a beige suede coat a la Balenciaga trimmed with mink, Miss Ann, and her sidekick Agnes Gooch with brown frosted hair, a rumpled blue tweed suit, and run-over beige sensible shoes, Sue, walking into a den of hell's angels. Later, Miss Ann said that it was so dark, all she could see were mirrored sunglasses and chains, and the home movies. These home movies were being shown all over the bar that evening. They featured a lot of what could euphemistically be called gynecological roadkill shots. Miss Ann walked up to the bar and asked for the guy she had talked to on the phone. It seems he wasn't there yet. He said 8 o'clock. She was early. He said the wallet was at the bar. "Why not just give it to her and be done with it?" Miss Ann asked. "No, 8 o'clock, the guy demanded. Now Miss Ann was mad. She went to a payphone and called the police again. After telling them what was happening, the officer on the line said, "Get the hell out of there! This sounds like a setup. For all you know, they want to kidnap you and hold you for ransom." Right about that time, she looked outside to see a police car screech up in front of the bar. 2 officers got out and ran in the door. She met them there and told them as well what was happening. They went up to the bar to ask some questions, came back, and dragged Miss Ann and Sue out the door by the scruff of their necks. "You are 2 lucky ladies," one of the officers scowled. "Don't you know this is the roughest bar in town? These guys were up to no good, and you don't really know what kind of danger you could have been in." "But my wallet!" Miss Ann exclaimed. "Forget it. If they have it, you'll never see it again." Miss Ann never forgave Laurie for the loss of that photo. What is, even now, so galling was that Laurie defended that hateful low-life sleazebag, even though it was obvious that he had stolen the wallet. You know, Laurie never recovered from Dad's death. She still has a Saint Daddy complex and is still trying to be Daddy's little girl. She has an almost morbid obsession with relics of him. So it's strange that at the time she didn't see the value of this one particular photograph nor feel compelled to do all in her power to get it back. Instead, she defended the low-life scum who stole it, and as a result, a small but precious piece of Miss Ann's history was lost. Thanks for listening. You can get the audiobook All Grown Up Now on iTunes, Audible, and Amazon, or from my website, allgrownupnow.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play. If you have any questions, you can reach me through the website allgrownupnow.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Kenneth D. King, on Facebook at Kenneth D. King Design, or on my main website, kennethdking.com.